concern.
Call to order the Monday, March 16th, 2015 meeting of the Human Relations Commission. Let's first cover item 2, agenda adjustments. So what we'd like to do, since we have a guest speaker tonight, is swap item 6 with item 5. So we'll cover discussion/informational items, and then after that our action items. Next, let's go to approval of minutes for last month. Move approval. Here's a second.
Second.
All right, all in favor? All right, motion carries. All right, item 4 is community participation, and we have 5 people signed up. So first, let's have Cynthia Beard, who will be speaking on community safety. So please come on up, Cynthia.
Good evening. First of all, I would like to thank the Human Relations Committee, as well as Chief Testa, for being here to discuss this pressing issue of creating a community that is safe for everyone. At the last HRC meeting, we heard stories about how people of color do not feel safe and welcome here in Boulder. Coupled with the USA Today published report that Black people in Boulder are arrested at a rate that is 5 times higher than non-Black people here, along with the many personal anecdotes that I've heard from friends, it is understandable why the city has a reputation for being unsafe for people of color. My hope is that this meeting this evening can serve as a launching pad for a deeper examination and reflection of what we can do to change the climate here in Boulder. I'm sure we're all aware that this cannot happen overnight, as this problem was not created overnight, and indeed far predates Chief Testa's tenure. The long-term benefit would be the cultivation of an environment of greater racial diversity that departs from Boulder's notoriously white privileged demographic, which is often mocked by people outside of our insular little bubble. A good first initiative in shifting the dynamic here in Boulder would be to dismiss the charges against the Black man who was arrested at a predominantly white march in support of the Black Lives Matter movement that has been gaining momentum nationwide. As long as racial disparities exist in how police treat people in Boulder, we cannot claim to be a community where Black lives do indeed matter equally. Shifting to a restorative justice process for my good friend who was arrested, which could include a community dialogue about racial disparity in Boulder, would signal that this city is serious about addressing racial injustice. Thank you for your time and consideration of this matter. I genuinely believe that our proposed solution would be in the best interest of our entire community, and my request is grounded in the hope that racial inclusiveness is something we would all like to see happen here in Boulder. Thank you again.
Thank you. Next, Darren O'Connor, who wishes to speak on rate of racial arrests.
Hello to 4 of the 5 Human Relations Commissioners. I understand Mr. Bateta, if I say his name right, is probably home taking care of a child, so I'm glad to see that things worked out that way, I'm assuming. I want to welcome Chief Testa to this gathering tonight. There's a lot of interest in hearing from you, and I first want to say that I think it's a testament to Boulder's, both our activists and our community of people of color and at-risk people, and our police department, that we're all showing up on this issue. You know, things didn't really start here, but we can make sure that any problems end here by working together. So it's exciting that we're doing that. It's a somewhat small community, and so it affords us a lot of opportunities. I'm grateful to be part of that. I did want to share that I heard from a woman who spoke very powerfully at the city council meeting in Denver a few weeks ago when they increased the authority of the Office of the Independent Monitor. And she shared that she was a white woman. She has 4 kids, 2 of them are white, 2 of them are black. And she shared how often her 2 children of color are arrested in Denver, driving the same car, with maybe the same tail light out. That there's just no doubt in her mind. She presents really an independent study of just how different it is for your 2 sets of different kids. And unfortunately, it's been pointed out that that's happening also in Boulder, and it's been a learning experience for me. I want to share that I'm also learning. When I first heard these statistics, I thought that the police were the first place to look, but I'm realizing that it's also that we're such a homogeneously white community that everyone who doesn't look like us tends to look suspicious. And I don't know how we push back on that to make people feel safe, but I guess I want to end on really that I hope we can all work together to make this an inviting community, a safe community. And I know from the people I've spoken with who live here or have lived here and couldn't wait to get out of here or can't wait to get out of here, which breaks my heart that people are saying that about our city because of how they're treated, because of the color of their skin. I know they're fearful. They're fearful of the police, and they're fearful of how people look at them and treat them here. And I don't know how we change that as a group, but a room like this full of people who care, and I count all of you among that, is an important start. So I'm really grateful to everyone being here. Thanks.
Thank you. Next is Judith Lansman. Please come on up. And she will be speaking on racial issues. Welcome.
Hi, I appreciate being able to speak. I'm a long-term Boulder resident since 1977. I have given birth and raised 6 children here, 4 of whom are white and 2 are biracial and appear black. And I will tell you from my experience, I did not fear the police with my 4 white children. I did not fear the school system. I felt that both agencies were for my children and not against them. I felt that they were welcoming and friendly towards them and approached them, I wouldn't necessarily say with respect, but some equanimity. That has not been the case for my children of color, unfortunately, and it has been hard for me to say that and to experience that. But the city of Boulder is not as welcoming for my brown children. They are viewed with suspicion quite often, particularly my adorable son, who once he became a teenager was, as Michelle Alexander would say, a criminal black man. And it's disheartening. I don't think necessarily Boulder is any worse than any other place of its size, but I certainly think that we could do better and that we could be an example as we like to present ourselves as a conscious community. And I would say in terms of the Human Relations Commission, that one of the things I found very frustrating as a parent with both the police and the school district was that there was no place to complain. There was no place to lodge a complaint. And I consider myself well educated. I've been a PhD candidate, and I could not find a person to say, look what's happening. So I appreciate Chief Testa being here. I really appreciate that we finally, although it took perhaps Ferguson and Trayvon Martin to bring up these issues, I've written to the paper quite a bit on racial issues, and I have to say that I'm usually published, but the consensus is that Boulder doesn't really want to deal with racial issues. We don't want to admit that we have them. And I would say that I really welcome the opportunity now that we can discuss and bring up racial issues. So thank you.
Thank you. Next is Derek Jones, speaking on policing. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you to the Human Rights Commission for allowing me to speak this evening. Thank you for Chief Testa for being here to present and all of those good things that we all say to get it started. So I've lived in Boulder for about 2 years now, and I will say that my personal experience is that I do not overall feel welcome. I will say though, from my personal experience, that it hasn't had really much to do with the police specifically per se. I work in an environment where I have to deal with the police, have contact with the police on not a regular basis, thank goodness, but somewhat of a regular basis. And every time that I've had an experience in my work environment, it's been pretty good. They've been professional, they've done their job thoroughly, they've consulted, and I think they have a good working relationship with police officers. My personal experience with the police throughout my life has been a little bit different, and my personal experience with the police here that was negative for the first part actually occurred in another place. I don't know if I should say it, but one of the local places that start with an L in this area, and I got the usual, which I call the usual, which is what I'm usually told when I'm stopped by the police when I'm walking down the street, is that there have been some reports of some robberies in the area, and we just want to check you out. So what I wanted to speak to specifically when it came to the notion of policing, and I read the USA Today report, and I understood what you were saying, Chief Testa, about how the statistics were being looked at, and how some of those were warrants and some of those were out-of-towners, and I think that even with that being the case and reducing kind of how we might even look at those numbers, that it is still something of concern. Most of what I face in Boulder has to do with the community, microaggressions, different things like that. Having someone else who worked in a trusted position, who was in their official capacity, asked me whether or not my son was going to be a basketball player or a football player when he grew up. Those kind of things, looking in publications and not seeing people that look like me. But one of the biggest concerns of my experience with the police here was that I was involved in a situation that required a police report. And it was surprising to see that report come back a week later and have it be a total fabrication. I work with incident reports. I know the importance of getting a situation accurate. I also know we are human beings and we can't get everything right. But I would definitely advocate for something, whether it is video or audio, that would protect both the police officers and the individuals who are involved in altercations or situations, so that that stuff comes back accurately, because in the court of law, the police officer's word is bond, and it's a hard road to climb to try to say, that didn't happen to me, or I didn't say that. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. That's okay. Next is Jen Watson, who will be speaking about the police diversity trainer. It's coming up.
Hi everybody, thanks for having me tonight. I don't know that I've ever been so intimidated by the police right now. No, that was a joke, sorry. So, first to introduce myself, as I said, I don't know if I said this, I'm Jen Watson. I'm the facilitator for Boulder Coalition and Alliance on Race, and I'm also a 22-year resident of Boulder, and so I have very clear concerns about this community as I've seen it grow and change, and especially with the demographics over those years. I've worked in social justice issues and racial justice issues for probably 20 some years. And so I really, I'm here tonight to just make some brief points and make some requests, Chief Testa, of you. And so I I know a lot of people tonight are focusing on race and racism. I also want to just point out, I do come into contact and receive reports from many different people, whether they're homeless people, people from the LGBTQ community, and of course, racism. So, so as you know, I met with, Darren and I met with Deputy Chief Johnson last week, and that was really an excellent meeting. And as I've said, I was really impressed with his transparency, and I was really just appreciative and grateful. And so one of my main requests, I'll just say my two requests. One is that your police department, you be willing to collaborate with the HRC, City Council, and grassroots organizations such as BCAR. There's actually several out there. My second request for you is that we have the opportunity to ask you very clear, direct questions about the diversity trainer that you've chosen, such as what is his actual education in being a diversity trainer. I read a brief biography and saw that he has volunteered with the NAACP. Unfortunately, I don't think that equates to education in being a diversity trainer, and I think that that's really an important, vital piece to who is going to do that training. So those are my two main requests, just that we know more about that diversity trainer and that perhaps we get to make recommendations about that person. And then the other one, that you consider being willing to collaborate with the HRC, grassroots organizations, etc. So thanks for your time.
Thank you. Okay. And our final speaker, Rob Smoke, will be making a general comment. Welcome.
Hi, thanks. My name is Rob Smoke, and I live in Boulder, and I did serve on the HRC for 5 years. And I was the chair. I was the chair twice. And I can't remember, I hardly remember anything that we did. But we did work on bias crime issues, and there were any number of occasions where there were issues where people ask the questions, how do these actions reflect a commitment to human rights and civil rights? And we have to find answers to that sometimes within our heart, and it might not be decided by a single large event, but a lot of small events that added together are something harmful. So I'm speaking in very general terms here, but I guess the issue for me is accountability. And if problems come up, if they're significantly addressed, and we've seen, I've personally been involved and have seen a failure of that in the city of Denver, and very recently. And so I guess, to me, there's just never enough accountability, and people need to keep that in mind. I'm going to add one more thing here. I think issues of homelessness and a short supply of housing in Boulder right now call for a much better response than what I've seen from the Boulder City Council in recent times. And it's, I think it's really to everyone's shame. I mean, I would encourage people to speak up about it, because there are alternatives to that. There are all kinds of regional housing agencies across the country that work better at addressing these issues, and bureaucratically maybe it's no cinch, but I think every single day, if we're not making an effort, because if the homeless population goes up, that's putting an undue pressure on the police. And I see, okay, I'll finish up, but I see that the city council comes forward when this issue comes up and says we do more than anyone else. And the problem is, if that's insufficient, it's insufficient. It doesn't have to do with, we're not here to rate ourselves or our performance against someone else. We're here rating ourselves against the actual problems. Anyway, I'm just going on here, but I want to thank Chief Testa for coming tonight and look forward to hearing from him. Thanks.
Thank you. So those are all our speakers for community participation. Let's now go to our item 6, discussion/informational items, and we're going to begin with our presentation by Chief Testa. And I want to thank you for coming. As you know, we've had community members approach us about policing in Boulder, and thank you for coming before us tonight. And it's my belief that community issues really require collaborative solutions. And I'm glad that you're here. You've been asked to speak on a few different topics, all of them pretty weighty. First, your philosophy and practice on community policing. Second, internal investigations. Third, Boulder's professional standards review panel. Also, disproportionate arrests of ethnic and racial minorities. And if we have time, maybe we can touch on the diversity training as well. And so thank you for engaging with us in this process. And commissioners, for us, this is our chance to learn more. And also kind of to start with the data, to start with kind of the current state in Boulder, so we get a good understanding and a shared understanding in that process. So Chief Testa will present for about 20 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A, so be sure to jot down questions as he goes. All right, stage is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Greg Testa, and I'm the Chief of Police for the Boulder Police Department. I appreciate all the comments that I heard tonight, and I know that this is an important topic. These are important issues for our community, for each one of you in our audience, and for the commissioners. These are important topics for our police department and for our management staff, our commission management staff. I want to introduce Deputy Chief Weinheimer, Commander Katie McEldowney, and Rich Dennick, who is the president of our Police Officers Union. So welcome to them. You know, the Ferguson and death in New York has raised many issues in this country in policing. And I hope that at a minimum, it has caused law enforcement agencies across the country to take an introspective look at what they do, and to make sure that what they're doing is the right thing to do, and that they're committed to their communities to be transparent, to build trust, and to build dialogue. As a Caucasian male, I will never understand I will never personally understand what a person of color goes through on a day-to-day basis. But I have different ethnicities and different races in my family. And so I can only understand from the experiences that they go through and from hearing the experiences that many of you have gone through, and to be open-minded as we dialogue and continue down this path. So I was asked to speak tonight about, I was told 3 areas, but I can talk about anything. Philosophy and practice of community policing, the internal investigatory process, and contact and disposition by ethnicity. I want to start off by letting you know that community policing is a policing philosophy that the Boulder Police Department embraces. It's not just a program. It's a philosophy that develops and promotes community partnership and problem solving to address and prevent crime, the fear of crime, and quality of life issues. We train our employees from the very first day they start with the department in this philosophy. And in community policing, there's really three main tenets. It is developing relationships with community members, individual residents, with business owners, people in the commercial side of the world, so that we can develop partnerships, we can develop relationships, build trust, and that there can be information transfer with the goal of problem solving, reducing crime. Part of that, the second tenet, is that you restructure your organization. And many years ago we did that to try and flatten the organization out so that decisions could be made at the lowest level within the organization. In other words, if an officer sees that there's an area that is ripe for change and they want to work on something, it doesn't have to get approved through the chain of command and the bureaucracy all the way up to the top, but they have the ability to do that at their level. Assigning employees, specifically officers, to areas that they're responsible to patrol in for extended period of time. We do that anywhere from 6 months to a year, so that officers can be in those districts so that they can become familiar and again get to know who's there. Our officers work with neighborhood groups and other groups within the community to collaborate on issues. And I want to go through and give many examples of that because I think it's important. I want the commissioners as a board to hear that, and I'd like our audience to also hear that. We have, so keep in mind that these are community partnerships and programs to try and break down barriers and develop relationships. We have officers that are department liaisons with many different groups. For an example, Boulder Housing Partners, where we have officers who are assigned to individual housing neighborhoods or housing developments. With ARC, Mental Health Partners, the Homeless Shelter, Bridge House, and certainly Boulder Outreach for the Homeless, the Overflow. In 2014, we began engaging and collaborating with mental health partners, and we implemented a program called EDGE, and many of you have heard that at council meetings. EDGE stands for early diversion, get involved. And really what it is it boils down to, there are mental health clinicians who work out of the police department. And they respond, they can either respond directly from the police department out into the community, or they might be riding with a police officer and respond to a call for service. Now, and they provide direct intervention services to community members in the street, rather than having to wait and make referrals or contact turns into an arrest. It's an opportunity for somebody in the mental health industry to be able to provide those services directly, hopefully de-escalate or make referrals to somebody, so that we're almost instantaneously providing services. This summer, if staffing allows, we always battle staffing concerns. Our goal is to develop and implement what's called the Homeless Outreach Team. That team, as I envision it, would involve at least 2 officers, and their primary focus is not on enforcement, but working with other service providers, also EDGE, and they're out in the community contacting homeless people to try and provide services and referrals for them. Again, try to break down the barriers and get a dialogue going so that we can provide whatever resources we can for them to meet their needs. Again, trying to prevent arrests, trying to prevent further homelessness, do what we can. For many years, we've been involved in programs like Boulder County Share a Gift program, where officers collect gifts for underserved kids. They help families shop at Christmas time. We've also been very involved in Muscular Dystrophy Association, Special Olympics, and we've raised thousands of dollars for these groups. We have officers who work closely with our Latino community and who walk neighborhoods and meet and talk with residents. Our detectives have investigated fraud cases where immigrant residents were targeted. A recent large investigation involved a person who defrauded immigrant residents who were trying to obtain documentation. This case involved up to 72 victims and resulted in a conviction at trial. And that was just one example that I could think of that was recent, but our detectives have been very aggressive in investigating cases where immigrants have been defrauded. Last year at Jose's invitation, I attended the Latino Chamber of Commerce at CU. I was also part of a community meeting sponsored by El Centro Amistad, where we talked about driver's licenses for immigrant residents. In 2012 and 2013, during our recent master planning process for the department, we held community focus groups throughout the city, and we had meetings at Sacred Heart of Jesus Church for our Latino community. We participate in homeless community meetings, and employees have helped serve food during holidays. We watched the Selma movie with community members. Thank you, Darren, for that invitation, if you're still here. And we had a dialogue with community members in January. We participated in a panel discussion at CU with our Boulder legislative representatives. We've met with student groups at CU. And most recently, last week, I participated in a large community forum at the Potter's House Church in Denver. And the Potter's House Church is the largest multicultural, largest African-American congregation in the area. And I was invited because I am personal friends with Pastor Hill, the lead pastor. And although they focused more on Denver and Aurora issues, I did participate, and there were over 700 attendees from the congregation. Our internal investigative process, which we call professional standards, really starts with our hiring process. And our goal each time we hire is to hire, number one, the best applicants we can. And our goal is always on diversity. We continue to look at better and more effective ways in recruiting to try and meet those needs and those goals. We look at how we conduct background investigations and psychological exams to vet out biases in employees. We try and do our best. I think we have one of the best hiring programs in the state of Colorado. And I'm not saying that because I'm your chief, but I'm aware of what other programs involve, and ours is extremely comprehensive, where we send background investigators out of state on every applicant so that we can actually talk to references and employers. Most agencies don't do that. Those are phone calls. And you really have to do it in person. And finally, the applicants who have made it to the final phase have to be involved in an interview with our management staff. And that includes command officers. That's 14 employees, including myself. And I have to tell you, I think that's a very intimidating process for somebody to come in and sit down and to be interviewed by us as a final step. And if you get our blessing, then we'll offer you a job. Training is really the next step in the professional standards process. Our officers who attend an academy get extensive training in the academy on ethics, cultural awareness, and anti-bias policing. And I'm actually going to go through and just tell you how many hours they get in that, because I think it's important. They get 8 hours of ethics and anti-bias policing, 2 hours of interactions with special populations, 4 hours of bias-motivated hate crimes, 4 hours of victims' rights, 8 hours with risk assessment response, 2 hours of training with hearing impaired, 32 hours of use of force, and 8 hours of domestic violence. So that's coupled with all the other mandatory trainings that they have in terms of skills training like shooting and arrest control and driving and all of that. We provide ongoing training on diversity, anti-bias, and cultural awareness. And this year, all employees in the police department will receive 8 hours of training from Wendell Pryor. And Wendell Pryor is a gentleman that I met when I was in grad school many years ago. Wendell has, I don't think he has a doctorate degree, he has a master's degree. He teaches at CU Denver. Wendell used to be the HR director for the city of Aurora, for the city of Oakland, for the city of San Francisco. He was the director of the state's civil rights division. He has taught anti-bias and cultural awareness training for many, many years. As part of my curriculum in graduate school, I took a class where he taught for a semester. So he is more than qualified to be involved in training. I feel very comfortable that we have Wendell as part of our training curriculum. We provide Spanish language training for our officers. And last year, 2 of our liaison officers spent 2 weeks in Costa Rica for an advanced Spanish immersion program. They did that on their own because of their commitment and wanting to further their skills in the Spanish language. The internal investigative process involves accepting complaints and the interview and review process, and then finally the disciplinary process if that's appropriate. We accept complaints from anyone. Complainants can have an advocate present with them. They can work through the HRC and in the liaison. It was Carmen. And that has happened in the past. Our department policy and contractual language provide direction on investigative procedures. When an investigation is complete and it mirrors the scope and depth of a criminal investigation, where witnesses are interviewed, evidence is collected and reviewed, and it's all put together in an investigation that then gets forwarded to the employees. And it may not be just an officer, it could be a non-commissioned employee. It could be a dispatcher, it could be a records clerk, it could be anybody within the organization. So the supervisors then, it's their job, each one of them, the employee's supervisory, what we call a chain of command, reviews that entire investigation and they make recommendations to me. After the supervisory investigation is completed, the investigation goes to the Professional Standards Review Panel. Our police department was proactive and involved residents in our review process approximately 22 years ago. At that time, the HRC was involved, and so was the ACLU involved in setting up the current process that we have today. Few agencies in Colorado have citizen input in their review process. Our process has been an example for other agencies. The city of Longmont has a very similar process to ours. And we often get calls from communities throughout the country who are interested in our process. The Professional Standards Review Panel consists of 12 panel members. There are 6 department members and 6 residents. They have to agree to serve a minimum of a 2-year term, and they have to agree to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And the non-disclosure agreement prohibits them from talking about personnel and disciplinary matters with anybody that's not involved in the process. And everybody does that. Our internal employees have to do that, and the citizen components have to do that. Because employees have due process rights under the state of Colorado and personnel laws. Internal applicants who apply have to fill out an application form. They're interviewed, and I make that decision on who gets selected as the chief of police. Residents are selected by the city manager's office from a pool of qualified applicants. Now, we're in the process now, as many of you know, of replacing 4 panel members as we currently. And that deadline ended Friday at midnight. I don't know how many applications we have. The sergeant who's managing that process has gone on vacation, and I'm gone next week, so we'll find out. But some backgrounds on our current panel members. We have an administrative law judge. We have a senior science writer for the National Renewable Energy Lab. We have an undergraduate student from CU Boulder. We have a retired attorney, and we have a current attorney. So recommendations then from the supervisory review process, all the supervisors, and the panel members then come to me as the chief of police. I collate all of that information, review the investigative file. I then have to make a decision on the disposition of the allegations. Are they sustained? Are they not sustained? Was the employee exonerated? And then if there's if the allegation is sustained, in other words, there's evidence to support the allegation, then I have to make a final decision on discipline. And then discipline is carried out within a certain period of time based on policy. So I wanted to talk next about the commission had asked about contact and disposition by ethnicity. And in early December, I had requested an internal review of our arrest and citation statistics for 2012, 2013, and 2014. And that report is complete. It was completed late last week, and it's posted on our website on the front page. Now, what I wanted to do was just kind of summarize in general that report. Boulder's population is approximately 103,000 residents. During the day, the population exceeds 150,000 people. We know that because that's what the folks in planning have told us. Police department receives about 60,000 calls for service a year, and our officers are involved in another 30,000 officer-initiated events. These are events where they initiate a contact, whether it's a pedestrian contact or a traffic contact. The 60,000 calls for service are actually dispatch calls where somebody calls our 911 center and says, I need an officer to respond, or I need somebody to make a phone call to me. So coupled between the 60,000 calls and 30,000 officer-initiated events, our officers are involved in approximately 90,000 calls annually. Between 2012 and 2014, the department made 9,253 arrests in those 3 years. We averaged 3,000 arrests annually. So not a lot of arrests for about 90,000 calls for activity. Approximately half of all of our arrests are mandatory arrests, where officers don't have discretion in making those arrests. Those are things like warrants, which are court-ordered, domestic violence cases, which by law they have to make an arrest if probable cause exists, and restraining orders. And there's a few other and sundry things that are encapsulated in that. During the same period of time for those 3 years, the department issued 59,240 citations. That was an average of 20,000 tickets a year. Our ticket productivity has been dropping. It changes, it fluctuates. Some years it'll go up, some years it'll go down. From 2012, I want to say it was like 23,000 tickets. In 2013, it dropped to like 21,000 tickets. And in 2014, it dropped to like a little over 16,000 tickets. I don't know why that is. 2014 was a huge transition year for our police department. As you guys know, Chief Bettner retired. My fellow deputy chief retired and became the chief of police in Louisville. And I was fortunate enough and honored to be appointed as chief of police. And it took us about 6 months to get our new staff and supervisory staff in place. And so we've done that. And I believe that probably had a large effect on that, but I just don't know. So it fluctuates. Next year it could be higher. Hopefully it's not lower, but it could be higher. Arrest percentages for all races except Asian and including Hispanic or Latino heritage as compared to the residential, racial, and ethnic demographic information were higher. So, whatever the percentage of racial and ethnic demographics are for the city, our arrest percentages for all races except for Asian and including Hispanic as a heritage were higher than the percentages. Overall, the percentage of citations issued as compared to the racial and ethnic demographic information was very comparable. And officers have more discretion, almost all discretion, in issuing tickets, which is the majority traffic tickets. So the tickets which they have the most discretion in was very comparable to our racial and ethnic breakdown. Now, I want to caution by saying that it's a very easy thing and to compare arrest rates with racial and ethnic demographics of a city's population. But that is not always accurate. The denominator is the key to this. We don't live and work on an island. We're the only people we interact with, and that officers arrest or cite are people on the island. There are people coming and going, as noted in increased daytime population. And I think to further provide an example, our African American population is about 1%. It's 0.9%. Our homeless service providers have provided information to us that the services they provided to African American clients is at 10%. So my point in saying that is we have to be cautious in always going back and trying to compare to the city demographic breakdown, because again, we don't live and operate on an island. There are many people coming and going in our community. And I just wanted to end by providing some information on programs that the police department has for children, young adults, our special needs community, and our Citizens Police Academy. And this is important because we really, really strive to reach out and be a part of the community and interact with the community and break down barriers. We have a program called Camp 911, and it's in collaboration with the Family Resource Center and in collaboration with the work that Carmen and Karen do. It's a program for middle school kids, and our focus is opportunities for economically disadvantaged kids in the Boulder Valley School District. It's a free program. They spend the day with officers and learn about our SWAT team, our bomb squad, crime scene investigators, police motorcycles, our traffic unit detectives, and all other areas. They get to eat lunch with law enforcement officers. They get to have their pictures taken. They take their pictures home, and officers talk to them about being police officers and a career in policing. This year, for the first time, we've developed a youth academy. And this is geared towards kids 14 to 18 years old. It's a 2-week camp that will start June 15th. And they're going to be able to observe and participate in all areas within the police department. And I'm really excited about this because we've never done this before. Again, it's to get kids interested in policing, it's to get officers to know kids, and to start a dialogue. Also this year, for the first time, we're going to start what's called an Explorer program or an Explorer post. This program is a formalized, it will be a formalized program where if kids are selected, they will be formal members within the police department. It's an unpaid program, but it's for kids from 16 to 21. I guess a 21-year-old's not a kid, but there's a formal selection process, and if they become an explorer, then they will have a formal position within the police department, within the Explorer rank. A lot of police departments have these. Some have, it's kind of died off across the country, but it's kind of making a resurgence, and we really think this is important because it's a great recruiting tool for us, because we know we'll know the participants, and they'll have an opportunity to get to know us. They'll actually wear a uniform, they won't have a gun, and they'll perform functions to assist officers. They'll go on ride-alongs. They have to have mandatory ride-alongs. They have to attend meetings, so many meetings. They'll be able to direct traffic. They'll fundraise for their Explorer post, and they'll participate and explore what they call meets and competitions locally and nationally. 2 more programs, and then I'll be done. We have a Safety First program, which we've done for many years. It's Safety First for Adults. It's a 5-week program designed to provide safety tips to adults in our community with cognitive and/or developmental disabilities. Program curriculum covers decision-making skills, street smart safety, home security, fire prevention and safety, safety while riding public transportation, and it also teaches students how to call the police using both 911 and non-emergency numbers. It's been very popular. And finally, we're in our 18th year of our Citizens Police Academy. It's for adults 18 years and over. And it's a 3-week-long academy. It starts in September. It's held every Wednesday night for 13 weeks, where attendees get an overview of the police department, and there is some participation in different aspects of that. So I wanted to let you know about that, because we're really trying to expand the spectrum for all different age groups, different needs, for underserved populations, underrepresented populations, and really trying to reach out and work with our community. That's all I had in my presentation.
Excellent, thank you so much. So now it's our chance to ask questions. And is there something we need to start? Okay. Thank you for your time this evening, Chief. I appreciate your presentation, and it was helpful for me to understand all the inner workings of your department. So just a couple of, I think, quicker questions, and then maybe some more involved questions. Were you using the terms tickets and cites interchangeably? Is it the same thing?
Yeah, so thank you for pointing that out. A ticket or a citation or a summons, they're all interchangeable. Yes.
Okay. Or a summons?
Yes.
Okay. And then a moving violation would be not included in that?
A moving violation is a traffic term that if a person gets a ticket, a summons, or a citation for a moving violation.
And okay, thank you. And so what I understand about community policing, I mean, you know, it really helped to see the importance that you've placed and the department has placed on not just community policing as a philosophy, but as practice. And I'm just curious, how in your merit system would one know that you have placed this importance on community policing? Like what does it look like that an officer really bought into community policing as a practice?
Oh, I think that's a great question. So it is it's part of our philosophy, our fabric. It's not just about issuing summonses, it's about solving problems, and officers have discretion in whether a ticket would be issued or not, because as we know, issuing a ticket may not be the best way to resolve a matter. There may be a different direction. The EDGE program is an example of that. And at the beginning of the year, our employees citywide are involved in establishing what we call performance plans or performance expectation plans, where they sit down at all levels in the organization. They sit down with their supervisor and they talk about what is to be accomplished in a given year. Some goals and objectives are mandatory because the organization has said this is the direction we're going in, and some are personal development or professional development goals that employees are involved in. So community policing is taken down to that level. It's also a part of evaluation processes, and we're going to further work on that. And it's also part of our department formalized award program, where at the end of the year, or at least twice during the year, we award our employees for meritorious service, for problem solving, for excellence in their work.
So just so I understand, so there's two kind of areas, the required goals and then the professional development goals.
For performance expectations?
Yeah, is that what you said?
Yeah, there's goals that the department or the commander of that individual work group says we want to work on, and there's also areas where an employee might say, I want to go to training because I want to develop myself in a specific area because I'm interested in a promotion, or I'm interested in detectives or something.
Okay. May I keep going? Sure. Okay. And then, so you were going through the data, and I was trying to jot down as fast as I could what you were saying. So if I understood you correctly, about 1,500 arrests annually that don't fall under a statutory requirement to arrest.
No, we averaged, in the last 3 years, we've averaged 3,000 arrests per year.
Right, and you said half of which?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Approximately half of our arrests are mandatory arrests.
So the officer doesn't have a choice.
Does not have a choice.
Does not have a choice. So there's 1,500 that we're left with arrests annually.
Approximately.
Right, roughly, okay. And so out in the field, I'm just trying to envision something going down, call for service or caught in the action, or, the officer has now a choice to make to detain or not to detain.
And there's a whole thing, all his or her training is coming into play, all these variables coming into play into that decision. So I'm curious, what detention alternative is there for an officer? Is you don't do direct referral to restorative justice, right? Restorative justice is an option once they're arrested and in the system, they're going through the court process, right? And then somebody determines somewhere that restorative justice would be an appropriate disposition.
That's true through the municipal court. However, there's a pilot program that the district attorney's office is involved in. It's a grant, and it's just starting to be rolled out, and we're starting to learn more information about that. I believe that, well, it's a juvenile, they're starting at the juvenile level, and then the hope is to expand it to adults. I believe that there is a direct referral portion of that.
Oh, for your officers?
Yes, I believe that's true.
Just for juveniles?
Just for juvenile. I'm getting a, Carmen and Karen are saying yes, so.
Okay.
So, yeah, and then that program, the hope is to expand that to adults also.
Okay. The reason why I asked that question is because, you know, an officer might have determined that something ought to be done. It doesn't rise to the level of detention. So in all fairness to the officer, what else is there out there? What as a community and as a city are we providing? I mean, I've heard in my professional life officers say over and over again, give me some options. I want the whole array of options, detention and booking being on one end of the continuum, and something else along the way. And so I think that could be an important part of our community conversation, is what kind of options are we providing for the officer?
I agree with you. There's, so to kind of give you the array of options are, an officer has to make a decision, and so they do nothing. They issue a referral for a juvenile into juvenile court, and this is separate from, so that's similar to a ticket for a juvenile. They take somebody into custody and take them back to one of the police offices, issue them a ticket and release them from there. They do a book and release at the jail, or they do a full booking at the jail. We talked about getting EDGE involved in however they can do that. In other words, whatever is applicable for that set of circumstances. And now we're venturing into the restorative justice grant that the district attorney has.
So I'm just curious, why would an officer bring someone down to book when they know that that person's just going to turn around and be released? Is that to gather more information at the time of booking?
You're talking about taking them to the jail and do a book and release?
Yes.
Yeah, it's because they need to get prints from them, and they need to get photographs.
Okay.
Maybe it's a crime involving a weapon, or it's a lower level sex offense, and they need to have that information. Now, you can't do that on a felony. A felony has to be a full booking. There are no options for that.
And then just a couple more questions, if I may. The statistics that you gave about the arrest percentages, did that include juveniles and adults? Is it the whole? I'm just trying to figure out how this data is being.
Oh, you know.
Because that might make a difference.
I think it's just adults.
Just adults. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so.
And if that's, I'm just drawing a blank. I believe that's true, and if I find it's different, I'll.
Okay. And then when you were describing the internal affairs process, you gave kind of a few steps. You accept the complaint. There's an thorough investigation done, and then there's notes and recommendations that are compiled. And I'm just curious, who does the investigating?
So there's a sergeant assigned to our professional standards unit. He works out of my office. There are 4 people in my office. There's myself, a public information officer, the internal affairs sergeant, and an administrative assistant. So he works out of my office. It's
Okay.
risen to that level in terms of importance and management.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then do you know what percent of your officers live in the city of Boulder?
I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, Chief, thank you for accepting the invitation and coming and speaking to us today. So you had talked about police interaction with the homeless, and you spoke extensively about getting in touch with nonprofits, with EDGE, and so is the way that the police interact with the homeless in the community, is that something that is, can you talk about what has changed from the past to what you're doing now? Identify things in that list that you gave that are new and upcoming and that may not have been in place in the past. And then also, among things like EDGE, what kind of feedback have you gotten from officers in the community based on what they would like to see, what they would like to see in terms of direction from you and from the community as a whole, city council, in helping them do a better job of interacting with the homeless population?
So let me try and work through those questions, and I may have to ask you to repeat some of them. In 2012, I was asked to put together an estimate on the number of, or the amount of time that our staff spends working on homeless issues. And there was a methodology that I went through, but it was certainly not a scientific process. It was the best I could come up with. And at that time in 2012, we estimated that the time that our officers incur interacting and working with homeless was the equivalent of 12 officers working full-time. So there's a significant time investment there. So anything from our perspective, from the police department's perspective, as a first responder, anything that we can do to provide alternative resources to homeless individuals to keep officers from having to respond to calls, and many of those, the vast majority of those interactions were as a result of dispatch calls, is a win. It's a win for the community, the homeless community, and it's a win for the police department. We're all aware of, that there's a cost. There's a hard dollar cost associated with first responders being dispatched and interacting, and if there's hospitalization, if there's no health treatment. And if we can reduce any of that, then that would move us forward greatly. So what are we doing now that we weren't in the past? EDGE, which we've talked about. I'm really excited about the opportunity to put together a homeless outreach team. Colorado Springs, I think Pueblo has one, but Colorado Springs has a very comprehensive unit. They've had one for a long time, and it's actually expanded. We send officers down there, and they've spent time with them, understanding what they do, what their process is, and they've actually ridden with their officers to learn how they interact. And it's things like they know, they interact where they get to know each other on a first name basis. And by the way, that happens now. We have mall officers and officers who work this area that personally know transients and homeless and travelers. And we even had an officer who recently had a baby and brought in all her maternity clothes and gave them to to a young lady that was at the Bridge House and was in need. So I'm excited about the opportunity to put such a team in place and to do it as a pilot project. And you know, wins don't come easy in terms of numbers because they're not out there writing tickets. It's not a bean counting. It's not a bean counting outcome. It is, as a matter of fact, enforcement isn't their primary objective. Yeah, if there's behavior, legal behavior, and they have to take action, the expectation is you would take action. Anybody in our community would expect that. But their primary job is to dialogue, figure out what resources they need, to get on their phone immediately once they've established service providers, and to be able to say, hey, I'm in touch with a family, they have 2 young kids, got to get them off the street. You know, maybe it's a phone call to Alpha immediately, maybe it's whatever it is. It's to try and speed things up, facilitate the process, and provide resources.
Okay. Do you have an opinion on how the police will handle new laws that get passed that might disproportionately affect the homeless, or increase contact between police and the homeless, and take things like the camping ordinance on the municipal campus, the smoking ban, issues like that, where they have an option to ticket people, but also how does that play into some of the vision and that you just described for how you would like to see those situations handled?
Well, as you know, those are big issues and divisive issues in our community. There are many pro-homeless advocates, and for as many interactions or phone calls or correspondence I have from those community members, I have just as many, if not more, that are demanding that we're not doing enough. So we're trying to strike this balance as a police department, and we're trying to interact, we're trying to police based on expectations in the community, but still show compassion and dignity. And so it's a larger, as you know, enforcement is not going to solve this problem. Enforcement has its place at the table for illegal behavior, because we're not going to tolerate illegal behavior. But if we can look at larger programs to get people off the street and housed, then we are in favor of doing that.
Okay. Can I continue? Also, I wanted to know about training with the police on bias-motivated crimes, incidents, and my understanding was in the past it wasn't given to everybody in the police, but that has changed now. So if you could speak specifically to that.
Yes, we provide training every year to our employees. And there is a lot of training that's on our plate every year. In November, we sit down as a management staff when we start talking about the year coming up, when we start talking about what it is we want to accomplish, what did we accomplish in the past. We start setting goals, directions, and training is a portion of that. There is an inordinate amount of training that is mandatory that we have to provide. Officers have to they have to get so many hours in certain skill sets every year. There's city mandatory training that all city employees have to comply with, and then there's training that we want to offer. And anytime we offer training, everybody gets it. So not just a few people would get ethics or anti-bias training. Every officer would get that. But it's a matter of trying to figure out what training that is. And it's not just linear training where we bring somebody in. Now, with Wendell Pryor coming in, that's pretty specific training. But every one of our employees a month ago went through training that was not specific to cultural awareness and inclusiveness, but it was really on developing a vision and mission in the organization and how we do that and move forward. It was more management-related type training, but everybody went through it. But there's also an inherent ethics part that was built into that in terms of, so you know the direction, and I've explained the direction, you know, my philosophy for our police department, how do you get behind that? And as it rolls down to an individual officer, what is your piece of that? Because everybody has a share of the responsibility in doing that. So my point in saying that is, training can encompass lots of things and it can pull in different areas.
And specifically on bias-motivated incidents, I think in let's say police contact is made, a situation happens, and a big piece of that, I would think, from the standpoint of the DA's office, is what kind of getting good information that can help get those convictions, because as you know, it can be extremely difficult to get, even with the laws we have, to get a conviction under the bias-motivated crimes ordinance. So do officers have specific training to get that in the moment when they can get that good information that would help, as opposed to maybe viewing an incident not in that light, missing that information in the moment when it would be key and timely, favorable in a timely way to get that.
Right. In other words, can we do an effective investigation to determine whether something is bias motivated?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can. And our officers, as part of the ongoing training, they receive legal updates every year, and they receive new law training. And so they're up to speed on elements of crimes. They have CRS, Colorado Revised Statute books, to look at if they're unsure, is this a bias-motivated crime? There are other resources that they can pull in terms of supervisors to get direction or counsel on, and they're knowledgeable in terms of the elements of a crime and interviewing to try and determine what is or what isn't. And we're really, this is a community that's very sensitive to that, and our employees are aware of that, and our employees are very sensitive. Internally, we have processes set in place that if there is believed to be a bias-motivated crime, that there are notifications that are done. And the district attorney's office is consulted. Because something at face value may or may not be. There may believe that it is, but it turns out it may not, or vice versa.
I guess continuing with that issue is a lot of feedback I've gotten in the community, not just recently, but just in my lifetime. I'm actually a native of Boulder, so I've spent my whole life in this community. And I think, could you speak to people who might not feel comfortable calling the police as a victim? And have you looked into why people, the common reasons why people, specifically underrepresented people, might not want to do that, and what is your philosophy behind that? Do you have a vision behind maybe changing that so that people do feel comfortable calling the police in any situation?
Yeah, I think that people across the board have varying reasons. If they make a decision to not call the police, there are varying reasons to do that. And it may not be race or ethnic based. It may be because There's drugs related, there's alcohol related, they're in a place that they don't want a family member or a spouse or a significant other to know that they're at. There's victimization involving sex-related crimes where it's very difficult for somebody to process that and make those decisions. In those type cases, our investigators, our detectives are very astute in those areas, especially when it comes to sexual-related crimes. And they receive extensive training in the victimization and being supportive, but yet not pushing too much, and allowing somebody the ability to process and to be involved with advocacy groups. When it comes to race or ethnicity, all of those can play into that, and also what can play into that is a cultural piece, that somebody may have cultural experiences from a different country where they don't trust law enforcement, that law enforcement is overtly corrupt, and they're afraid or scared that the same would be true here. We've also heard that some people who maybe from the same ethnicity, maybe not, who prey on immigrant populations will threaten them and say, if you call the police, or if you call the police, you'll be deported, or if you call the police, something bad, something negative will happen to you. We have, I talked earlier about the different community groups and dialogues involving our Latino community, and almost every time those concerns come up. And it's a matter of continually talking and working through those and reassuring them, and working with El Centro Amistad, and working with Jose and the work he does with the Latino Chamber. And I've become, over the last year, very knowledgeable with Jose in those areas, and breaking down barriers any way we can. And I talked about our officers who are out and who are fluent Spanish speakers. They may be they may have they may not be Hispanic. They may be a white officer, but they're in those communities and they speak Spanish, and they're talking and talking to kids and talking to parents. And it's an ongoing process that we have to continue. I don't think we'll ever be able to ring the bell and say, we've done it, we've got it. We have to continue to always nurture that and develop that.
And lastly, I'd just like to say that I was at a community meeting. I believe Deputy Chief Johnson was at that meeting as well, and I'd spoken about, it was around policing in the community, and I had talked about the need of just acknowledging that police don't always want to make contact with people, and so I'm just glad that you got those statistics and commissioned that, because it isn't always about police contacting people, in which case they'll walk away and blame the police if they felt that was they felt hassled by it. But as a community, we need to look at who in this community is calling the police, and on what, and on who and why, because you guys have a job to do. Obviously, if contact is made, what you spoke to today is about, you want that to go well, but also it's a responsibility in the community to better ourselves as a community and the climate of the community, so that maybe police contact isn't made when it isn't needed. So
I think that's a fair point, and I'm glad you brought that up, because there are calls that a supervisor or an officer will say, "We heard you, and we're not making any contact." There's no justification to do that, or what have you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just wanna thank you, and answered all my questions. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. We talked about the African American population as being 0.9%, and we talked about, you mentioned, how the homeless population increases, who we have in Boulder during the day. Were you saying that, I'm connecting your dots, and I wanna make sure I'm doing it accurately, are you saying that the rate of arrests of African Americans has to do with our homeless population?
I'm not saying that directly because I don't have any information to support that. What I'm saying is that if we're comparing percentages, and as I said, it's a difficult thing to do. So we have to be cautious in doing that. That I'm just pointing out, I guess, a statistical fact that the homeless service providers are providing, based on their breakdown, their percentages, African American was at 10%, whereas our demographics are 1% or 0.09.
Okay. Did you want to?
No, but I have two more questions.
Sure, do you want to ask another one?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we had people speak at our public comment period tonight, and that's not the first time, at our meeting, and as some of us have experienced out in the community, very similar themes, comments. I kind of want to give you the opportunity to respond to that. I think we asked you here because we see the opportunity for some community information exchange and also for healing, if I could summarize that a little bit. And I want to see, what are you thinking about in terms of, what do you think needs to happen in terms of that coming together, information sharing, healing? I know you can't speak about cases in progress right now, so I'm not going to ask you questions about that, but I know that that's on people's minds as well. So what are some things that you're thinking about?
Well, I think some of my comments were based on my opening remarks, where a lot of what could alleviate. I think dialogue is imperative. I think it's imperative at the larger community level, and I think it is at the individual level. And so I think that dialogue and communication can go a long way. I think that it's important to break down barriers in a community so that law enforcement isn't just seen as a entity that polices the community and they drive by in a patrol car. That they're out and about, that they're walking, that they're talking, that they're engaging. And the vast majority of information exchange and contacts that occur on a daily basis have nothing to do with a detainment or that somebody's in trouble. It's, hi, how you doing? How's your day going? An officer